At this time, I'd like to introduce our next speaker. He is a WPI graduate and a member of Paradise's Day Ministry that provides the Man Is You program, and you'll see their table in the back, which addresses the pressures and temptations that men face in modern culture. He is now a resident of Florida and an owner of JMJ Site Development, which is a philanthropic construction company supporting worthy ministries all over the world. He has an incredible, emotional, true life experience to share with us this morning. His talk is The Journey Away from God and the Journey Back. Please welcome to the stage, Jeff Jochen.
Gentlemen, my name is Jeff Jochen. I am husband to my beautiful wife, Sandy, of 24 years, father to Faith McKenzie, who's 20 years old, and to Jonathan Andrew Jochen, who would be 36 years old. And we'll talk a little bit about him in a bit. In my talk, you're going to hear a lot about things that we don't like to discuss, men. You're going to hear about pornography. You're going to hear about alcoholism. You're going to hear about drug abuse. You're going to hear about abortion. You're going to hear about workaholism. Half of you may be gone halfway through the talk, I would think, huh? But what I want you to hear, men, throughout the whole talk is not my broken past, but God's mercy. Isaiah chapter 43, verse 4 says, "We are precious in his eyes and honored, and he loves us." Each one of you, he loves you. He doesn't judge you for your sin. He will eventually, but he doesn't do it now. But what I want you to hear is God's mercy throughout this whole talk. So why don't we get started? I was born and raised in Dartmouth, Massachusetts, to loving parents. Good Catholic Christian parents taught me to fear God, to love God, and to serve God. I have an older brother by the name of Mark, 5 years older than me. When he got into high school, he got his girlfriend pregnant, junior year. That was a big stain on my family's eye, if you will. But he decided to have a shotgun wedding, and he decided to have his child. I was sitting on a couch right next to his son last night. See, when I got into high school, though, my mother, what she told me, being 5 years behind my brother, she said, "If you make the same mistake your brother made, I will castrate you." I did not know what castrate meant when I was in 8th grade, so I looked it up, and it wasn't pretty. But I tell you, that's how I went into high school, with that image in my mind that I could not have a child. Now, I don't blame my mother. She is a God-fearing woman, and I love her beyond imagination. I blame me. See, so let me hit rewind. Let's get started. 11 years old, was at a baseball tournament. I think we ended up winning the tournament by God's graces. Went back to my friend's house. The entire team was there. We had a cookout, swam in the pool, had all kinds of fun. About 6 o'clock, all the parents started leaving, all the players started leaving, and all that was left was my parents and my friend's parents, whose house it was. And they decided to go out to dinner, leaving myself, my friend, and his daughter, his sister, home alone, if you will. Home Alone. That's a great movie, ain't it, at Christmas time? We've all seen it 475,000 times, I'm sure. My friend looked at me and he said, "Hey, why don't we watch a movie?" And I said, "Sure, I like movies." I was 11 years old. Probably going to put in a Disney movie, right? Well, he put in a movie, all right. It was hardcore pornography. My fight with pornography started at 11 years old, men, I'm 53 years old today. I'll let you know when I have it conquered, but I don't. But we cannot allow that moral, intrinsic evil into our houses, into our phones, men. We can't do it. I'm not going to speak in detail on that in this talk, but if you have a phone, get Net Nanny on it. If you have a computer, get Net Nanny on it. Don't let the devil in, men. Don't let him in. You young guys, I do talks like this all over the country. Some of the most heartbreaking conversations that I have is when I'm sitting there talking to a 15-year-old girl, and she said, my mother and father gave me a phone when I was 8 years old, and I went right into hardcore pornography, and it has ruined my life. At 8 years old, man, that's where my prodigal son journey started, with pornography. It didn't end there, though. It went quickly into alcohol. See, God writes straight with crooked lines. Born and raised in Dartmouth, Massachusetts. Now I live in Tampa, Florida with my wife and daughter. I started drinking alcohol at 12, 13 years old. You know what I started drinking? He's going to guess it right here. You watch. Southern Comfort. At 12 years old, men. Southern Comfort, 12 years old. That quickly progressed into marijuana. I was smoking marijuana before 8th grade every single day. Went into high school. Marijuana is a gateway drug, man. It's a gateway to something worse. I was at a party at 15 years old, New Bedford, Massachusetts. I know you're familiar with that. Me and my friend it was very crowded. Very crowded. We were backed up to a door behind us. And I said to my friend David, I said, hey, why don't we go downstairs? It's way too busy and crowded up here. And we went down into the cellar. I can say that in Massachusetts and not get people looking at me funny. I say that in Florida and everyone's looking at me going, cellar? Cellar? Yeah, down below the ground. Well, we went down into the bottom of those stairs, gentlemen, and at the bottom, it was pitch black in there, but there was one light on. Got down to the bottom of the stairs, turned, looked in the back of the room, and there was a young man sitting there in front of a table that was chest high, and there was a pile of white powder on it. Pile of white powder on it. He said, would you like to try some? That was the start of my issue, an addiction with cocaine. So you can see how this progresses, right? Somehow, some way, through all of this, the alcohol and the drugs, I played a little bit of football. I did pretty good in high school. Got the opportunity to go to a lot of different colleges. But you know which one I chose? This little school down the street here called WPI. Anybody here from WPI? Yeah, all three of you. All three of you. God bless you guys. So I played football at, if you can imagine, WPI back in 1987 through 91. I was a two-time preseason All-American and had the Buffalo Bills, yes, the Buffalo Bills, come to that little school down the road there. You guys should have been there. They wanted me to play in the NFL. But to show you how bad I was with my addictions, we played Springfield College, a little down the road here to the west, right? After the game, that was one of the games that they went to, we know ahead of time, early in the week when the scout is coming. After that game, I had a particularly good game by God's graces, and the scout was going to come into our locker room. But he went into the opposing team's locker room first, and my coach told me that, and I said, what did that idiot do that for? He wants me to wait around for him? Well, I'm not going to wait around for him. And my party friends showed up, came in the locker room, and I left with them. I left a locker room prior to an NFL scout coming in because I was more concerned with snorting cocaine than being on the TV on Sunday. That cocaine addiction, I graduated from WPI, did not play in the NFL because of my addictions. And I want to tell you this one little story where that cocaine issue led to. And it led to my parents' den. That's where I slept the last 2 nights. I was home with my beautiful parents. I was about 24 years old, and all of my friends from college had come home to Dartmouth, Massachusetts. And we partied all day long, man, at the beach. There was cocaine here, there, and everywhere. And I went home that night in my parents' den where I was last night. And I laid down on the floor, having a cocaine-induced heart attack at 1 o'clock in the morning, and I was going to die. In my parents' den. They would have woken up the next morning and found their son dead as the day is long. I called my brother up and I said, Mark, I said, I'm really sorry I didn't make it to the NFL. I'm sorry that I'm a useless drug abuser. But I'm going to die here tonight, bro. And I just want to let you know that I love you. And he said, Jeff, let me call 911. And I said, no, Mark, don't do that. I said, because if this Jesus Christ person is real, this person that I have no relationship with, that mom and dad talked to us about since we were little, if he's real, he's going to come visit me tonight. And he's either going to come visit me and save me, or I'm going to die and I'm going to visit him, and I'm probably not going to see him for very long. But just know that I love you, brother. And the hound of heaven came. Man, the hound of heaven came like you. I felt an overwhelming presence come over my body from head to toe. I felt the Lord Jesus enter into my life. I woke up the next morning on the side of my bed asking him to put the pieces back together. And the Lord did. That was at 24 years old, man. We're going to hit rewind a second. Because after I graduated high school and before I went to college at the age of 17, I got a phone call from my girlfriend at the time. I know you guys don't understand this, but years ago, phones used to be connected to the wall, not hanging around in your phone wherever you go. Well, my father answered the phone and he said, son, it's your girlfriend. I said, okay, what did I do wrong now? She said, Jeff, we have a problem. And I said to myself, man, as you can imagine, the castration, the words castration came up in big, bold letters. She said, we're pregnant. And my heart was broken, man. At a time when I should have been thanking the God of the universe for blessing me with the greatest gift that he can bless us with, I was more worried about going to the NFL and putting skin-tight pants on and a helmet and bashing other grown men around. That's what I was thinking about. I told her, give me 24 hours and I will call you back with a decision. I did not pray about it, men. I did not ask God. I didn't ask her what her opinion was. I called her up the next day. I said, set up an appointment. We're having an abortion. I'm not ready to be a father. A week later, we were driving down to Providence, Rhode Island, because the local football star can't get caught at the local abortion mill. We drove all the way down to Providence, Rhode Island. I did not say one word to that beautiful young woman. Not a single word. We drove up to the porte-cochere. She looked at me. She said, "Are you going to come in?" I said, "Why would I come in? I can't. What happens if somebody sees me walking in? What happens if I know someone in there?" So she walked in and got the abortion. As she went in, I went out into the parking lot. There was a bunch of trees around the perimeter of the parking lot. It was the third Friday of July of 1987, and my Chevy Malibu did not have air conditioning, men and women. And I was sweating bullets like no two-a-days had ever got me to sweat. And I remember looking to the roof of my car, which that was God for me. I don't have, I figured he's somewhere up there, right? And I said to him as I was sweating bullets, "God, is this what hell is going to feel like?" Because I had borrowed $200 from a friend and drove my girlfriend to an abortion clinic and paid a stranger to kill my unborn child in the womb. Breaks my frickin' heart to say that. I had denied my fatherhood, and I had sacrificed my son on the altar of convenience, all so I could run around and smash other grown men on national TV and get paid millions of dollars to do it. She came out of the clinic. I drove her home, gave her the pain medicine, and broke up with her 24 hours later. Can you imagine the coward that it takes, men, to tell you, not even ask your girlfriend if she wants to have a baby, drive her to an abortion clinic, make her get an abortion, break up with her 24 hours later? What a frickin' coward. I have a 20-year-old daughter. If a man did that to my daughter, I'd put my foot so far up his butt, you wouldn't see it unless it came out of his mouth. But that's what I did. I went off to college. You've already heard that part. But again, this talk, men, is about God's mercy, His mercy. Fast forward into my mid-20s, I met my beautiful wife. We got married at 30. Next chapter of life. Time to have a baby, right? Isn't that what we do when we get married? Well, guess what? Failed pregnancy test after failed pregnancy test after failed pregnancy test in my early 30s, I started thinking, oh, shoot. Maybe God remembers what happened when I was 17 years old. How many of y'all have seen the movie The Patriot by Mel Gibson? I know you have. What does Mel Gibson say in that movie? He says, "I have long since feared that the sins of my past would come back to haunt me, and the pain was more than I could imagine." That was what I thought, man. Jeremiah 15:18 says, "Why is my pain continuous, my wound incurable, refusing to be healed?" God was punishing me, man. That's what I thought in my infantile mind. I was like the people of the time of Noah, the flood, or the Egyptians of the time of the plagues and the pestilence. God was punishing me. The God of the Old Testament was punishing me for my sin. My little sin that I had thought I swept under the rug, right? I was in that abortion, my wife and I couldn't get pregnant. We had to see a fertility doctor. I remember kneeling in the fertility clinic, looking up at the sky again, kind of like that Chevy Malibu thing, huh? And saying, "God, I know I've turned my back on you. I know I'm a miserable sinner, but can you please give us a child?" What was put before us, men, at that point in time was two options. One, a joke, IVF procedure, man trying to be God. Not a good idea. Don't even think about it. I know most of you are past that age, but some of you aren't. That procedure was $3,500 and had a 75% chance of succeeding. The other procedure that was available to us is called the gift procedure. It's an acronym. Look it up if you want to. That procedure cost $10,000, and because my wife had one ovary, we had a 5% chance of success. So at that point in time, I didn't know much about God, but I knew plenty about money. And them ratios didn't really work out very well. But we went and talked to the counselor at the Catholic Church. He told us the church is silent on the gift procedure. That's the only one she'll allow. We spent the $10,000, and Faith Mackenzie Joquin was God's blessing to us. Faith Mackenzie Joquin, not because of some country western singer, but because of Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1. Faith is the realization of what is hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. So you would think, I'm in my mid-30, 33, 34 years old. Now it's time to turn to God, right? I had not spent 1 minute of my life begging God for forgiveness. I asked him for a child, he gave me one. You know what I did, men? Probably the same thing that you guys do too. I treated him like a damn vending machine. I said, God, every time I look out the back window here, I see my next door neighbor playing soccer with his son. Why can't you give me a son? But that wasn't in the cards for us, my wife and I. So I got pissed at him, and I went back to my next disease, which was workaholism. I'm not going to speak a bunch about that, men, but I can tell you that I had my own $8 million plane, $30 million building. I used to walk around with $3,000 or $4,000 in my pocket, not because I needed it, but just in case I pulled it out, somebody would be able to see how much money I had. How many of you fallen into that trap, climbing the ladder of success, only to figure out it was up against the wrong damn wall? Well, that's what I did. And it wasn't until my late 30s, and my wife and I and daughter were at church one Sunday at Our Lady of the Rosary Parish in Land O'Lakes, Florida. Much hotter than it is here today, probably in the 90s. And a man small in stature, but a giant in faith, walked up to the ambo by the name of Steve Bowman. And he started talking about authentic male leadership, kind of what Bear was speaking to. He started talking about being men who pray with their family, men who eat with their family, men who sacrifice for their family. And I made a huge mistake that day, man, because my wife was sitting right next to me, my daughter was 2 seats away, and I said, hey, the Cowboys are playing the Giants at 1 o'clock, and this man is talking about authentic male leadership. Like that means anything to me. And my wife looked at me, and my daughter looked at me, and I knew I was going to participate in that program. And that program has single-handedly changed my life and hundreds of thousands of men across this country. There's nothing like it, men. At that point in time, I started taking my faith seriously. I started going to church on Sunday and Wednesday, because that's when we met at 5:30 in the morning. I started going to confession once a month instead of once every 10 years when the priest guilted me into it during Lent. And I ended up getting a spiritual director, Father Ed Sylvia, one of my best friends on this planet. I met with him the first time, and he said, Jeff, I've met a lot of spiritual knots in my life, but you, son, take the cake times 10. I said, gee, Father Ed, I mean, that's what I'm here for. The least you can do is give me some words of encouragement. He said, I'm going to. He said, you need to go to get a general confession. I said, okay, how the heck do you do that? You do that at Dollar General? Does the priest show up to Dollar General and you do a general? He said, no, you moron. He said, you have to study for it. And then you go to a priest, you go to God, you go to in persona Christi, and you get on your knees and you beg him for forgiveness. Well, I did that. And all I can tell you, man, is I prepared for 3 months for that. And I walked into that confessional at Corpus Christi Catholic Church, because I can't go at the local parish, right? Kind of like the abortion clinic. If I did that to my pastor, can you imagine if I did my general confession with my pastor, he probably would remember some of my sins, as bad as they were. And he doesn't, men, and they don't. But I went to Corpus Christi Catholic Church, and an hour and 15 minutes into that confession, I had to confess to God that I had taken the life of my unborn son in the womb so many years before. When we got done with that confession, and I heard the words of absolution from that beautiful priest, he was crying, I was crying. He walked out of the confessional and he said, welcome home, son. I will never forget that day, man and woman. I was floating on cloud 9. The hound of heaven, I told you at the beginning, mercy, men. Mercy, 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 mercy. God does not care about your sinful nature. He knows your sinful nature infinitely, but he wants to forgive you for it. The devil knows us by our name, and he calls us by our sins. God knows us by our sins, but he calls us by our name. So that day, I united myself with the God of the universe. These men that dress up in the black cassocks. Hold on one second. Why don't everyone get up, please, if you could? And let's give a round of applause for the men, hold on, for the men who have never left the front line of the spiritual battle. They have not left the front line, men, for 2,000 years. We have left the front line, but they have not. So give them the round of applause that they deserve. Thank you so much. So, general confession. What was the next step in my journey in healing from my prodigal son life? Very simple. My spiritual director said, you have a wife, you too, a man shall leave his mother and father and shall cleave to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. Share your abortion story with your wife. Let her carry the burden with you. I did. She does. I'm 6'3", 260 pounds. She's 5'4", 120, and I'm scared to death of her, man. Not in a bad way. She takes no crap, but she's helping me carry that cross, that burden that pain, men, from that abortion. What was the third step in my recovery process? I had to name my son. Well, first I had to figure out if I had a son or a daughter. So just like, men and women, you can go to Harvard, you can go to Yale, you can go to Stanford, you can go wherever you want to. If you want to become educated in life in something that matters, you walk down the end of that hall, you walk into that adoration room, and you sit in the school of silence, and you let that man teach you. So I did what I had started to do, as I got down on my knees in the chapel, and I said, "Good Lord, I don't know how you forgave me, but here I am. I come to do your will." And I said, "Lord, why couldn't you give me a son?" This is probably now around 40 years old. My daughter's 7, we're 42 years old. We're long past the opportunity of having another child. But I still was mad at him. And I said, "God, why couldn't you give me a son so I could play football with him and beat the crap out of him, I can't do that with my daughter. They'll throw me in jail if I do that." I've never lifted a hand to my beautiful daughter. And I was sitting in the chapel that day and kneeling down, and God hit me like a 250-pound fullback. He said, "Jeff," he said, "you do have a son. And his name is Jonathan Andrew Joquin, and he's standing right next to me. And we love you beyond measure." Man, I can tell you, when I heard God say that to me, I fell on the ground and I cried like I've never cried before for probably 2 hours, because I had a son in heaven. I had a surrogate in heaven that I could pray to, and he could pray for me. And I had a relationship with my aborted son. But that still didn't solve the pain, the hurt inside. So I went back to my spiritual director. I said, "What's next, Doc?" You know what I mean? We're trying all this stuff here. Maybe something will work. Keeping in mind the first step was getting forgiven by the God of the universe, which is the only step that matters, the only one, because it's the eternal salvation of your soul. But we're human, we have emotions. He said the next step in the process is for you to call your girlfriend and apologize to her. Men and women, I'm 45 years old. I hadn't seen that woman in 28 years, 29 years. So I looked at Father Ed and I said, "Father Ed," I said, "I know that wine is supposed to turn into the blood of Christ, but maybe you've been drinking a little bit too much of it before you converted it over. Because that's a bad idea, Father Ed. I know, I've heard a lot of bad ideas before, but that one's the worst." Long story short, I walked out of there, I talked to my wife, and I decided to call my former girlfriend. And man, that was the single hardest conversation I've had in my life in 53 years. I called her up. My friends got the number for me. I called her up. After a brief introduction, I apologized to her. And she said, "Jeff, I was young too. We didn't know any better. And I forgive you." And man, I melted to the ground. Because all we have to do is get the money and drive them there. They're the ones that have to get into the stirrups. They're the ones that have a complete stranger stick equipment somewhere they shouldn't. And they're the ones that have to go through that physical process, man. Don't think that you shared in that burden. Don't think you did. You do, I know you do. But you didn't share in it like she did. So I'm sitting there after that phone call. She forgave me. God bless her. Pray for her every day. What was next? I'm in the chapel, the school of silence. The only place, I went to WPI, they had a lot of smart professors there. Ain't nobody as smart as that professor sitting in the back there. Nobody that smart. The sum total of every one of the creatures he's ever created don't have that kind of intelligence. So I'm sitting there and I say, God, how am I going to get recovery from this pain and suffering that I still feel in my heart from killing my unborn son? Here we go again, another 250-pound linebacker nailing me right in the chest. He said, you need to get up in front of people and start telling them how sorry you are for killing your unborn son. You think I was shocked at what Father Ed said? I looked at I think it was an exposed monstrance at the time. I looked up at it and said, man, I don't think I want to be Catholic Christian very long, because I don't have the strength to do that, God. Bam! Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through him who gives me strength. I walked out of that chapel that day and I said, I am going to go from one end of this planet to the other end of this planet, giving hope and healing to men and women who have suffered from abortion. I could tell you 1,000 stories of God's work after me giving this talk that I'm giving. Thousands, but I'm only going to share 2 with you today. I was at a conference in Tampa, Florida. Yes, it's much hotter than it is here in Worcester. And I always ask God when I'm panning the audience and speaking to people, is let me see the one, Lord, the one that is really hurting from abortion. Let me see him. Let me speak to his heart. See, I'm a broken pencil, guys. This is God's love story he's writing. Help me to see that person, Lord. Let you speak to him. Well, I got done with that talk, and as usually happens, there was a line of about 15 men that came up. There was one man in particular during the talk that God had me focusing straight in on. I never stop and look at the person, but he had me focus in on that person. That person was not one of the 15 people in line. At the end of the 15th person, who all of them did the same thing, they came up and said, I had an abortion 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. Go get reconciliation. The man that God had me focus on was not in line. So I went to the back of the auditorium and I stayed there. I put my head down and I prayed to our Blessed Mother. I said, Blessed Mother, I failed your son today because there was a man in the attendance that I know you needed me to connect with, and I did not do it. And it is because of my pride and my woundedness I was not able to do that. And when I said that, when I finished saying those words, I felt a hand on my shoulder, and I turned to my right, and guess who it was? This man broke down before he said a word in a way that only someone who's lost a son or daughter can do. He said, I have 4 children. He named the first 2 and their ages. And then he said, my wife and I lost our jobs after the second child, and we had 2 abortions before we had our 3rd and 4th child. And he said to me, I have never even spoken to my wife about those abortions, and it has been 25 years. He said, but after I gained my composure, I'm leaving the conference in the middle of it, and I'm going to go home on my knees, and I am going to beg that woman for my forgiveness. And I said, you do that, and then you come back here and you confess your sin to the God of the universe. That's one story. The second story, I was speaking in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, same kind of talk. They differ a little bit each time, but it was an abortion healing story. And in this situation, I was behind a mic like this, and there was 3 tiers of people. So as I'm talking, I'm looking for a way to, just to be honest, guys, to get away from people. because after I do this, it's a very exhausting process. So I can gather my thoughts before the men start coming forward. Well, I thought I was going to be able to do that, but there was an 82-year-old man that was sitting in the front row. And that 82-year-old man, when I got done with my talk and everyone was up doing the cheering thing, if you're going to cheer, you cheer for that guy right there. Don't cheer for some broken pencil. You cheer for him. I didn't do anything to die for your sin. This 82-year-old man came sprinting like I've never seen a linebacker come, and he hit me as hard as he could hit me. And he looked me in the eyes, and he said, I cannot believe that God can forgive me for what I have done. And I said, brother, what have you done? He said, I had an abortion 62 years ago. And you know what I said to him? I said, come over here and meet this Catholic priest. Because when you get done confessing your sin, he's going to say the same thing to you that my priest said to me. Welcome home, son. At the beginning of this talk, I talked to you about mercy, men. Okay? Who knows who this gentleman is up on the screen right here? I know some of you do. Blessed Miguel Augustin Pro. Bear was, I'm going to steal a little bit of his thunder. This man right here was a Mexican Jesuit priest in the 1920s in Mexico. Mexico, the Catholic Church in the 1920s was persecuted heavily. If you were dressed in your cassock and you came out of your church, they would arrest you. They would arrest you. There was an attempted assassination on the president of Mexico. A day later, this Catholic priest right here, this soldier of Christ right here was arrested because they wanted to make an example of him. The only reason we have pictures of him today is because the president wanted to film it or take pictures of it so that it could work as a deterrent for those who would be so bold as to be a minister of Christ. Well, you know what, man? This man right here, Blessed Miguel Augustin Pro, when he was walked to his execution by firing squad, you know what he was doing? He was praying for his executioners, praying for them as he went to his death. As you look in that picture, it's an old picture, you can't really tell much about it. When he raised his arms up like this, men, he had a crucifix in one hand and he had a rosary in the other. And right before they were getting ready to shoot him dead, you know what he said? Viva Cristo Rey. Long live Christ the King. As they gunned him down. The 18th century philosopher Edmund Burke said this in Parliament one day. He said, all that evil requires to triumph is for good men to do nothing. I say to you men today, let me ask a quick question here. I have 4 minutes left. What was the leading cause of death in the world in 2022? Anyone? Abortion. So if I understand that correctly, man, 44 million babies were created by the Creator and sent back to him by other creatures. Do you really think that that would happen in the year 2022 if good men were doing something? Come on, men of Worcester. There should be 1,000 people in that adoration chapel. There should be hundreds of people standing in front of the abortion clinics in this area. There should be men, good men of character and honor, sitting at CVS's and Walgreens telling them, no, you're not going to ship abortion pills to teenagers to kill them. Men, is it not time to raise your hands and say Viva Cristo Rey and mean it? Are you going to fight for Christ? You're going to, listen, it's one thing to not be aware. It's another thing to be challenged and do nothing about it. This is what I want to do to finish. I want to read to you the letter I wrote to my aborted son about 4 or 5 years ago. I am sorry, my son. As you are well aware, you started your journey in life in July of 1987 in the womb of your mother. It must have seemed unusual for you as you watched your father secretly borrow $200 from a friend and pay for your first trip to the doctor. It must have been difficult for you when your mother entered the building for your appointment and your father didn't have the courage to come in to join both of you. It must have been unthinkable for you when you saw your mother lying on the table in unadulterated fear as the doctor began his procedure. Why are my mother and father letting this happen to me? I can imagine were your thoughts as a complete stranger took your life in the womb. Jonathan Andrew Joquin, I am so sorry for what I have done to you. I am sorry that you'll never be able to take your first steps into the loving arms of your parents, that you'll never be able to fill your lungs with a deep breath of fresh air, that you'll never get to speak the words of amazement to your parents, that you'll never be able to have a birthday party and blow out the candles, that you'll never get a chance to board the bus for your first day of school, that you'll never get to meet your cousins, aunts, or uncles who would have loved you beyond measure, that you'll never get to meet your grandparents who would have loved you imaginably. I am sorry that you'll never get to meet your sister Faith, who is 20 years old and would love to give you a hug. I'm sorry that you'll miss your high school graduation, that you'll never have the opportunity of going off to college and getting a degree, that you'll never get the opportunity of growing up and getting married and having your own children, that we will never get to play catch with the ball in the backyard. I'm sorry that I put your mother in an unthinkable position with your precious life. I'm sorry for choosing my future over yours. I am sorry for waiting so many years before I had the courage to apologize to your mother. I know with certainty one day, Jonathan Andrew, that we'll meet in heaven, where we will share the embrace of love that I long to share with you today. But in the meantime, my son, I ask for your prayers of forgiveness and mercy, and know that your Father loves you from the bottom of his heart. I'm so sorry for what I've done to you. Men, what I want to do in closing is this, and I'll be very quick with this. I give this talk all the time. I've done it in front of the White House. A couple weekends ago, I gave it with Vice President Mike Pence at Student for Life Gala. What I don't want you to do today is to go away from here on fire and then go cold. I don't want you to, Proverbs 26:11 says, as a dog returns to his vomit, so man returns to his sin. I don't want you to do that. So 3 months ago, my daughter and a bunch of people that are close to me convinced me that I should set up a YouTube channel. I have no idea what a freaking YouTube channel is, but they asked me to set it up. On that YouTube channel is about 25 talks that range from abortion, alcoholism, workaholism, success, significance, all kinds of topics. This is what I'm here to tell you today, man. I want you to go home with a homework lesson. I want you to get your phones out of your pockets, and I want you to point it at that screen and click on the QR code. I don't have any books to sell, men and women. I don't have any CDs to sell. I get no financial benefit for that. What I do get is every man that reintroduces himself to that man right there, that gets me 1 day off of purgatory. So I need everyone in the room and everybody that you've ever met before to go to that. But honestly, men, there is a healing series on that. It's a 7-part healing series we filmed in Houston. If you watch all 7 of those episodes, and they've been watched by hundreds of thousands of people in 3 months, I don't know if that's good or not, I really don't care. If you go through all 7 of those sessions and it does not impact you greatly and cause you to go to confession, you send me an email and I will send $100 to your favorite charity. Is that a deal? You got some homework to do? So let's just do this. I'm not going to steal from Bear's thunder, but what I'd like to do is for everybody to stand up, and I'm going to say Vivat Cristo Rey, but you are going to say Long Live Christ the King. Okay? You ready? Vivat Cristo Rey. Long live Christ the King. Vivat Cristo Rey.
Long live Christ the King.
Vivat Cristo Rey.
Long live Christ the King.
God bless you, man.